from Jaybird Quilts, and I want to thank you guys all for your response to my question of what did you want to know more about binding. Didn't know there'd be so many responses, but it's great. So I'm going to do my best to answer all your questions. I've already made some samples that I've shown before with the flange and some other things, but people were asking how I get my corners so perfect. And it's really not that hard, so I'm going to try and show you how I do that. And then people did also ask whether you're doing a tumbler or a hexagon quilt, how to do those weird corners. And I made this and I just haven't shown it to you guys yet. So I have a tutorial where I'm going to show you how to do the inside corners, the outside ones, the weird angles, a couple different options. So like this one you see a little bit smoother, that has a sharp point. So I'm going to go over your different choices that you can do. Kind of a binding nut for people who know me. I love binding. I know some people are afraid of it, but it's just kind of my favorite thing, especially stripe bindings. And I tend to always cut them on the bias, so you get that like wraparound effect. And one of the number one questions that I hear a lot is why bias? People are always like, oh, it's so much more cutting and it's wasteful. Is it really necessary? And the answer is yes. It's actually stronger. And I'm going to try and show this in diagrams in the post as well, but it's easiest to actually just explain it to you. So if you think of straight grain binding, when it goes around the edge, the threads go this way and go this way. So if one of these threads happens to break over time, that same thread goes all the way along the edge of your quilt, so you've lost a lot of stability. Bias binding, going to go at an angle and at an angle. So if one of those snaps, it's only right here in a small, section. It's not around the entire thing. And because it's a bias and has a little bit of give, there's less chance that the threads are going to snap as opposed to the straight grain, which doesn't have as much give. You give a little tug, you could tear them over time. So I know it's a little bit harder to cut, but I'm going to go through that. It really is not that much more difficult. It's a lot stronger over time, and it's really worth the effort. So I'm a big bias fan. So hope you enjoy the fun tips I'm going to give you. So one of the things that I'm going to go over is the corners. People always want to know how I do my perfect corners. The first step is sewing your binding onto your quilt by machine, and I show that in my first tutorial how to do that step by step. And the key here is the corners. You have to stop at that 1/4 of an inch, go off, do the fold, go back. If you get that measurement wrong, wrapping it around to the other side is going to be a hot mess. So make sure that's right first. I've done it wrong plenty of times, and you don't want to have that mess. And then it's time to wrap. So binding clips, otherwise known as hair clips, you can get them at most convenience stores, quilt shops. Better than pins. You're not going to poke yourself, and help hold the binding in place. So I always put on more than the area I plan on binding. But not the entire quilt at once. Just helps to kind of have it all down. It kind of works to like iron in place almost, if you think of it. So what you do is wrap the part from the front side around to the back, so you can see what I'm doing. Da-da-da-da. Like magic. All right. So the corners seem to be everybody's nightmare, and they're really not that complicated. In general, I do on the opposite on the back of the front so that there's less bulk. And what I mean by that is, you see on the front, this side goes over. So I'll make sure that this side goes under on the back. Sometimes it doesn't want to work that way. Usually you try it either way on the back, and the binding's going to tell you kind of which way it wants to go. So the first side, turn so you can kind of see what's going on. So the first side that I'm going to put down, going to wrap it nice and tight, and sometimes you got to pull and fidget to get it exactly where you want it, and pop a clip on like so. And then I'm going to grab another clip, and you want to kind of use your finger to press that all the way into there, because if you leave it out like this, that's not going to be what you want. So press it in up there and pull down. And ideally, that's going to line up with that. Then you turn around to the front. It looks all nice. And sometimes I'll even put the clip on the actual corner. I'll pop the clip right there. So if you start clipped well, by the time you actually get to the sewing, it's going to stay in the place that it wants to be in. So up next comes the sewing. Okay, so by now you have your binding on your quilt and you're ready to get to your hand sewing. A lot of people have asked what needle preference I have. I like a long, skinny needle. I tend to use these, can you see them? Milliners. And I am a big fan of Aurifil threads, or on the go, I'll take these from Superior. It's got 36 colors, so it's nice. Usually you want to match your thread to your binding. For this demo today, I'm going to show you, I'm going to use dark thread on a light quilt just to give you better sight of what I'm doing. So the first thing you need to do is knot your thread, and learned how to do this on a bus trip to a quilt show called a quilter's knot. Who would have known? Take your needle and take your thread and put your thumb and wrap it 2, 3, 4 times around, and then squeeze it with your other hand and slide it down, and like magic, got a perfect little knot. All right, so I'm gonna do my best to show you what I'm doing here. And I have the quilt to my right and the binding to my left. Some people bind like this. I kind of bind away from me. I don't really know who taught me, but that's just how I work. So imagine this was on my lap. So I always start by coming up from underneath. And like I said, you should be using matching thread. And you want to go into the backing. You make sure, keep your hand underneath so that you're not going through to the front of the quilt. Go into the backing and up, just catch a tiny little bit like you're doing applique. And usually I'll do, 3, 4 stitches and pull them all at the same time to save time with the stitch and pull, kind of thing. And usually my knot's nicely tucked underneath to begin. And I won't bore you with me getting all the way to the corner, but be back in a minute to show you how to do the corner. Okay, so you have successfully begun sewing your binding in place, and you get to a corner. What do you do now? Really not that hard. You remove the clips as you go, and you want to sew till you get to right here, the same way you've been doing up the whole side. So for me, that's 2 more little stitches. And then I sew from this point to the tip. And usually it's about 3 stitches I can squeeze in there. And keep in mind, normally your thread matches, so you're not going to see all this. So we're at the corner now, and I put my needle back in near where I just came out, and I want my needle to come back out right there. So hopefully you can see I put it in through the top and back out through here. And then, just like I was doing on the other side, just begin to sew down this line, taking the clips out as I go. And there we go. We've got a perfect corner. Front looks nice and neat. It really wasn't that hard. So the clips kind of serve the purpose of pinning it, ironing it, holding it in place, all in one thing. So that's it for video number 1 on binding. I'm going to add more videos to answer the rest of your questions and continue to help you along your journey of finishing your quilts. But hopefully video number 1 gave you some tips and things, and you learned some stuff so that you can finish your quilts off beautifully. This is Julie from Jaybird Quilts.com. See you again soon.